Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is Vera Drew, an editor who broke out as a writer-director with her first feature, The People's Joker, a satire of DC Comics and alt-comedy culture and Saturday Night Live, which are three things you would not ordinarily expect to share the same universe. But that's Vera's gift. And with the film landing on critics' best of list 2 years after its TIFF premiere, this felt like a great time to have her on the show. Vera picked Hedwig and the Angry Inch, John Cameron Mitchell's 2001 adaptation of the cult musical he wrote and starred in off-Broadway with songs by Stephen Trask, about a cabaret singer performing a set in a rundown German fish restaurant while stalking her much more successful ex, a glam rocker who built his entire career on the songs he stole from her. Using all the tools of cinema, flashbacks, surrealist interludes, even animation, Mitchell turns his one-man show into a proper epic on an indie budget. A compelling, energetic story of one artist pouring her heart out to strangers and holding nothing back. It's funny, it's sad, it's brilliant, and now it's Vera's. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's really one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's like one that I feel like I don't really get to talk about that much. And I feel like it's one that like a lot of people are still discovering. Like I'd venture to say that like it's like even its like cult classic status feels pretty like recent to me.
Yeah, maybe. I'm surprised every time I find out that people haven't seen it. I'll put it that way. Like it feels like it's part of the culture on an almost cellular level. And in a lot of ways, you know, there have been tribute albums and the Broadway show and all of this stuff is out there culturally, but it is still like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the culture that sees it, connects to it, and responds to it. But that makes us feel more special.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I never like gatekeeping things, but I definitely like introducing people to stuff. So I'm hoping if because I think like for me it was a movie that was so important in like my queer journey and like early in my queer journey. So yeah, if any of people who are new listeners or old listeners to the show that like are at that stage, like I think it could just be a good one to check out if like you haven't seen it yet. Because it really gets in the weeds and has no problem doing that.
Yeah, I mean that's what the show is about. It's an advocacy podcast, so I'm glad to be able to be the platform. I am older and saw it, you know, as a full-grown man and all of that, but 23 years ago you were considerably younger. So when did you see it? Did you see it at the time? Did you see it later? How did you come to it?
I don't think I saw it until like my 20s. Like I really I had like a period like like right around I'd say like 2014, 2015, where I was kind of at the start of my queer journey and like really like it had just like sort of reached sort of my peak of like irony poisoning and like just started surrounding myself with like art that was made by queer people just because I think I had been mostly just like watching comedy and comedy television specifically like up until that point. So I remember like it definitely like started with John Waters. Like I'd always been a huge John Waters fan, but like I watched all of his movies in the span of like 3 days, which I don't recommend doing. It like kind of destroyed my brain. But so that was like in the rotation, and I was just kind of like trying to watch like all the big stuff that like was kind of under the queer cinema umbrella at that time. And this was one I had always heard about, but had never seen. And I think going into it, I kind of just thought it was going to be sort of like a Rocky Horror thing. I guess just like the Midnight Movie Association was there. And I like love Rocky Horror too. Like and that was probably, aside from Batman Forever, the first queer movie that I saw as very young. And I always had a complicated relationship with that and just like queer art in general because like I remember like watching Rocky Horror and not really understanding why it was something people would laugh at per se. Like I thought it was like just like a weird fun like genre movie or something. Like I think I was just like too autistic to understand camp. So that's all to qualify just with the fact that like I went into Hedwig very skeptical of it too. I think and just was immediately transformed and fell in love with it.
It really is just like a baseball bat to the face, isn't it? I mean, as an impact.
Yeah, it's just like it's unlike any movie. Like it just really and I don't know, like in some ways like I wish I had gotten the chance to see like the like the one person show beforehand, like seen it live, but like I don't know, I would have been like 3 years old when John was doing it. But like also like I think the fact that like I went in so cold, it's like a movie that kind of benefits from like going in cold, I think. Like because it's just it's like you said, yeah, it's just a baseball bat to the face. It's like just immediately it doesn't give you time to catch up and you're instantly just like transported into this world, and I love movies like that, especially like ones that feel like this personal too.
Yeah, I was utterly unaware of it when it was a film. When it in 2001 when it premiered, I went and saw it in a tiny screening room with about 12 other people, and everybody else knew about the show. I think maybe one person had seen it, and I was just there going, how do you even stage this as a, how do you make this in the world? How do you, and of course it was shot in Toronto, so it feels even weirder for somebody like me who lives here. And it's just like, I know that pizza place, but I didn't know it existed in this alternate universe where everything's glittery and beautiful and wonderful and also incredibly sad. Um, and this mix of like
Yeah.
it is your standard in a weird way, right? Like it's your standard Broadway pitch of coming into yourself after overcoming great hardship. But like the through line of it is so simple and so elegantly structured into the songs too. But there's something new and different and electric about it. And I think it's the like I still don't know fully if what it is. Like I think it's the collision of John Cameron Mitchell refusing to be camp and the music being so big and so broad.
Yeah. Oh no, I just agree. Like I think that's I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it's kind of just the most it's like one of the most sincere pieces of art ever made. Like it doesn't and like I don't know, to me it's like that's almost like what actual camp is like in a lot of ways. Like I think when the definition of camp has like changed so much like in you know like since like Susan Sontag or whatever, but like
Mm.
I think like there's this like purity to it, there's this like innocence, and I don't know, it's also just the fact that like he it's pretty tight like narratively because like it's a show that he had been working on for like 20 years, so like what other movie has like 20 years of like rehearsals before they like sit down and make it. um and yeah, I don't know, like I know like I'd found out recently from a friend who works with uh John Cameron Mitchell like on his like live stuff now, that a lot of the music, although like it was stuff that like was rehearsed in front of people like for decades at that point, um a lot of that music was written in a very short amount of time. Like they really it just like got cranked out so fast. And the his name's escaping me right now, but Steven.
Oh, Trask, Stephen Trask.
Yeah, Steven Trask. Like I think like most of the music he wrote like in 1 or 2 nights. And I think like I don't think that's like always makes good art, but I think that's like just it just was like it was like art that already existed that he like conjured into the universe or something. Like it just is completely I don't know, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, the combination, the impact of these songs. I'm trying to figure out how to frame it. It feels like it was born in full. You're present at the inception of the thing, even though, as you say, they've been working on it forever and ever before they actually made the movie. It's it's alive and electric in a way that feels like almost ill-suited to cinema here and there. Like it's a cabaret that's stuck on a screen right in front of you, but you can feel the energy radiating off of the screen.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's like one of the things that really works about it is like you are you're kind of held hostage within each song. Like it's very and the fact that like it's not really like a musical. Like it really is like it's actually like almost closer to like an abstract concert film or something, just the way the music is like kind of constructed. But like you're just watching all these songs with audiences of people who are like eating in crappy fish restaurants or like you know are just completely uninterested in the music that is like unfolding, so like it just really like draws you in and like almost like holds you hostage to this like super raw yeah, this super raw story. And I think like it's just so the second it starts, like I feel like you kind of know the like the roots that it's like sort of drawing from, like with like glam rock and like Lou Reed and Bowie and all that stuff. Like there's some, even though the music is quite different than all of that stuff, like there's just something about it that immediately is like, oh yeah, this is like it's kind of talking about that thing.
Yeah, the feel I got from it was, and maybe this is just because of the age Mitchell was when he performed it for the film rather than on stage. It's like if Nico grew up to be Bowie. It's like
Yeah,
he
exactly.
found the midpoint.
Yeah, that's such a good description.
Oh, thank you. But the hauteur that he brings to this, like, sort of dissolute, angry person who is very much because of her relationship with Tommy Gnosis, she has lost her own music, right? Like Tommy made off with her songs, and so she's the third-rate version of herself. And
Yeah.
over the course of the film, we get to see the both the development of the talent and the culmination of that talent. And so it doesn't matter that she's performing in a crappy fish restaurant. She is absolutely like the star that she's meant to be. And part of that is, the version of yourself that you carry in your own head, obviously. And part of it is the accumulated trauma that Hansel went through before she was Hedwig. But again, like, it's almost entirely done on John Cameron Mitchell's face and body. Like that, it's we don't see the
Yeah.
evolution. We're just given this fully formed person.
Yeah, it's so and you just immediately know who she is too. And like I think that was like the point in which that this movie came to me in my life. Like I was like starting to figure out that I was trans, but very deeply insecure and very traumatized, and also a very grandiose person. Like I mean, I think I still deal with that a lot, like where it's like, making things, you know, that are like kind of in this like sort of like outsider umbrella, but like I like I know like the most like selfish egotistical parts of me want to be mainstream. And like watching there's something about Hedwig where it's like she she doesn't care if people aren't listening to her because like it's like the like what she's giving is above them anyway. Like it's so it like I think it forced me to kind of like look back on myself and my own like grandiosity and like the places in which like my life didn't necessarily turn out how I wanted it, the ways in which it did, and also just like that that like I don't know, I think a very big theme for me the last couple years, especially like when I revisited this movie recently, um, I think as artists, a lot of times like we really risk um sort of giving our magic away to people that use it in the wrong ways or in this case in the film's case it's like Tommy does just like completely rip her off and like steal her entire set list but like I don't know. It's just there's something so just like as a fragile queer who who was like kind of exploited in comedy television for like a decade at that point. It was like, oh my God, like I'm complicit in my own like giving away my identity and giving away my art. And I had never I don't think there's a lot of pieces of art that are about that specifically. And the idea that it can be something that is given away to somebody that you loved and that loved you too is like, oh, it's just devastating. I'm probably gonna cry during this podcast. I'm realizing.
You can cut around it if you
Whatever, it's a
want.
safe space.
Yeah, I hope so.
No, it's fine.
Uh, um, I did want to say that that is something too that I don't think I've seen uh, quite so blatantly portrayed in media, at least not in American media. The idea that Tommy, who is, I mean, he's a fraud in a million different ways, but he is also a white Christian cis guy who simply takes things, right? Like that. The fact that he harvests Hedwig's music and claims it as his own, it's literally obscene, right? Like he's singing songs he shouldn't be singing on a million different levels because he obviously because his identity doesn't matter and he's just a poser anyway, and he's stolen this identity to be more successful. But it's like it's so subtly woven into the entire fabric, like the sense of stealing someone's identity when they don't even have the voice to speak to the theft and the power structure that was in
Yeah.
place. I was really shocked the last time I watched it to see how clearly that comes through, and that nobody picked up that thread. Like that, just People's Joker kind of has a thing about reclaiming power, but it's not quite the same, right? It's a different sort of reclamation and appropriation that's going on in that film. But you never see the truth of it. We're starting to see it here and there with. There's a documentary about Jackie Shane, a trans singer who came out of Nashville, I think, in the late 40s, early 50s, and had to move to Canada to succeed, but was still presenting as a man and recording songs. And her biggest number was a track, I can never even remember the title, but the main lyric was "Tell her I'm happy, tell her I'm gay," which read very, very differently in 1950, although not the way Shane sang it. And how it's just part of this whole wave of music in the 40s and 50s performed by black artists in R&B and soul who just didn't make it the way that their white counterparts did because they were more presentable and they were
Yeah.
more conventional to the what was seen as the mainstream. And Hedwig is, yeah, I mean, it's John, of course John Waters loves it, right? Like it's all wrapped up in the idea of outsider art and creating stuff that lives forever and may potentially even outlive the creator. But it's also about the predatory nature of entertainment and the way people who aren't as creative are constantly feeding on people who genuinely are.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, because it's interesting. Whenever I watch it, I think like I identify with kind of different characters every time I watch it. Like
Oh
which
yeah.
is again, like I think it's just like the best kind of movie is like when it kind of meets you on your own level and like you kind of grow up with it. Because like this most recent time that I watched it, I I really I almost read Tommy as like that stage he's in where he's like stealing and kind of harvesting her identity and her creativity, like that is just kind of the journey of an artist in general anyway, is like you kind of like start knowing you want to make stuff and just kind of ripping people off like completely. And like um I mean, like I think I kind of consciously did that to some degree in The People's Joker, but like I often think about like if I had like made a movie when I was like in my early 20s, I would have just been ripping off like Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino.
Mm.
If I had made a feature when I was a teenager, it would have just been a Kevin Smith movie. Like I wrote so many scripts in high school that were just like not good Kevin Smith movies. And like I think like that's something else that I really love about this is just like getting the chance to see that window in like the artist's journey where they're like sort of young and just starting off and fucking up and kind of just taking bits and pieces of identity from other artists. And Hedwig also kind of being that like that that sort of like a mentor to Tommy and like getting him out of his like being into like Europe and or Asia and like all the like shitty like dad rock that he's into and being like, listen, here's David Bowie, here's like punk, like let's just stay in the States and like listen to like what people and like also like to your point, it's like I think when you're the difference between a marginalized creator like Hedwig, who is like is a transsexual, but I mean like there's nuance to that obviously because like she's kind of forced into it
Hmm.
or kind of manipulated into it. But nevertheless, she's like a marginalized creator where and Tommy is just like this like traditionally just like one of the most beautiful men ever put on screen. um,
Oh yeah, 2001 Michael Pitt is the perfect casting for this role.
Oh my God, just amazing. He's so good in this part. But like when you're like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed cis guy, you get to publicly fuck up and rip people off and get thrown in the tabloids and like fail upwards in this way that like a trans creator isn't.
Mm.
Like, I mean, that's just like kind of a fact. And I don't know. I gotta check out that documentary you mentioned because that sounds so cool. I watched not to plug something that Netflix put out, but the Andy Warhol documentary that they did a few documentary series a few years ago. I mean, like I loved it, like because I'm definitely like a Warhol kid. But there was this kind of like section of it where it really was talking about the fact that like here's this artist who took pictures of trans people and cross dressers and various people on the gender spectrum, many of whom were unhoused or HIV positive or just completely broke, and he made millions and millions of dollars off this art. Um, like I think, and I tried to do this in my movie a little bit, I think queer people and queer artists, I think we like end up hurting each other. I really do think we end up playing the same kind of like cruel capitalist games that like um cis people and like cis institutions and capitalist institutions like inflict on us. um like that trauma kind of gets like re-perpetrated towards each other in a way. And I think that was like another thing that I really needed to see when I saw this movie, was just like the fact that like queer people could hurt each other. Like it was a very it was like the gentle hand guiding me into my journey, being like, it's gonna be a rocky road, kid.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about Joker, Folie à Deux, and The Beast, and new 4K editions of No Country for Old Men from Criterion and Demolition Man from Arrow. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. Well, where did that take you? I mean, where did you go after artistically? What was, did Hedwig turn you on to stuff, or did you just, was it part of a, like, was it a signpost or was it a roadmap?
I think both. I think like watching this movie was the moment where I was like, because I had kind of given up on my dreams of filmmaking at that point, to be honest. Like, just because I had had like a pretty successful editing career, I just did not see any sort of path. I think I was kind of realizing like that the pathway to becoming like a director um was very tricky for somebody like me who uh like I don't really know that I'd be good as like an episodic TV director per se. Like I think I was always kind of supposed to be making my own stuff. Um but like watching something that was like this clearly this personal um and this weird and this like deconstructed uh really kind of was just like, okay, like I think I could make a movie. Like I really think I could. And like I this was, like 5 or 6 years before getting the idea to make the People's Joker. But I think when I saw this, I knew instantly that like my first film was gonna kind of have a a one woman show quality to it, a kind of abstract like lyrical vibe to it that's like about identity and just about like your place in a time and place. Like I think like that's something that's so interesting about this movie too, is just like how like it is just so it is as much about Hedwig as it is about like the Berlin Wall coming down.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that I think was like super, and the mixed media component. Like those were three things that I took away and kind of was like, that's what my first movie is gonna be. And then on a personal level too, like it's so funny because like I remember the first time I watched it, when it gets to the end, after like in Midnight Radio's, like she's performing Midnight Radio, and like she takes off all her clothes and like her makeup is like all smeared and stuff. I was like devastated because I was like, wait, what is happening? Why is Hedwig not a girl anymore? And like I also like I had that moment and I was like, oh, well, this is like about like transcending gender and just like moving to this place of like actual identity and like authenticity on this like cosmic soul level. But like having that feeling as I was watching it was like oh shit, I am transgender. Like I am like because that's it was like that's not, me taking off all my clothes and like smearing the makeup and stuff is like it looks very different than Hedwig's journey. And here's somebody, it's why the movie itself is such like a beautiful metaphor for the trans experience while also being very much not about it at all.
Mm.
This is somebody who is like forced into a gender by like her mother and her partner and like her the structures of her society. Like it is so about like getting assigned a gender and getting assigned to the wrong gender in the way that like a lot of trans people go through. So like, yeah, sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, no, no.
I love this movie so much.
That is something else that I saw this time through, is that it felt weird the first time I saw it that that Sergeant Robinson is so clearly grooming young Hansel. Um, Gummy bears. I still call them gummy bears, but it's so clearly, it's like it's wrong, but it's also, as you say, it's a metaphor for if you don't know who you are, you want to be something for someone. And so
Mhm.
Hansel is led into this out of what I assume is genuine love. Right? Like he wants to be with Sergeant Robinson, who by the way is Maurice Dean Wint, who's one of the nicest people on the planet. And I still like, it's great casting because there's a kindness to the real person that he uses in the film
Mm.
that Mitchell clearly saw and wanted to push. But the Canadian casting, by the way, in this is like Andrea Martin obviously is the most visible one, but yeah,
Oh,
what
yeah.
they do here with like Karen Hines, who plays Tommy's publicist, is an actual publicist, or was before she was a filmmaker in her own right. So it's just like this great circular in joke to Toronto audiences, especially media people. But the sense that I totally derailed my point. The sense that Hansel, who becomes Hedwig, is going where ultimately they will need to be, but none of the initial choices are theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is like, um, I mean, that's just life, isn't it? Like
Mm.
and it's especially been my experience, with relationships, especially. It's like I really do think like relationships are like in in their most like um both like abstract sense and like if you really just want to boil it down, it's like you're finding these like reflections of yourself. It's these like things that are like um kind of like forcing you to check in with where you're at in your identity. And like I don't know, I think it's like why too, like depending on what part of, when I watch this, which character I'm like identifying with more. It's like I've been, I've never been as bad as Sergeant Robertson, but like I've definitely been Hedwig and as she relates to uh Yitzhak, Miriam
Yeah.
Shore's character, who's like basically like is Hedwig just reperpetrating this like no, you're gonna stay here, you're not gonna go perform Rent, and you're going to be a boy even though you're this like beautiful woman. It's I don't know, like I think it's something that like it's part of the experience of like growing up. And to your point too, it's like it's all paths lead to the like to that supreme destiny where you're supposed to be, even when you hit these like bumps in the road or you like come across people that like shouldn't be in your path for permanently. It was like what I wanted to do also with the People's Joker was just like talk about a relationship that was like um equal parts toxic but also very identity affirming. And like because that was my experience like in the relationship that Mr. J and Joker's the whole thing is sort of based on, is like this idea that somebody could be 100% the wrong person for you and the like absolute perfect person at the same time. Um, and yeah, and Hedwig being that for Tommy and Tommy being that for Hedwig, like it's just so it makes sense why the movie is able to like go so like cosmic in its scope of like spirituality and stuff too, because it really just is about it is just this movie about God in this way and this idea that we're all just like a part of this like same messy organism. It's oh so beautiful.
You said it's about God, and that's the other thing I wanted to make sure we didn't miss. I mean, it is literally a Platonic lecture, or a lecture on the Platonic concept of the other half, and it's again one of those things where it's not a metaphor. It's right there in front of the camera. We're seeing it the whole time, but then you get to the origin of love, and it suddenly stops being anything other than this beautiful musical metaphor, self-contained. I'm amazed that song hasn't been covered 100 times and broken out into the world.
Yeah, because it's like it's this that song is just about everything. It's just so it's like not only like the perfect like thesis statement of like the film itself, but also just like what creation is in and of itself, like why um both like creation in this like cosmological sense of like like it literally tells this like beautiful kind of like pseudo Gnostic Christian uh like hybrid of like Eastern stuff and the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like all rolled into one.
Mm-hmm.
God creating us, but it being this like and creating us out of love and hate at the same time. And like that like thin line being just where like inspiration and like creation and like art and in relationships and in the concept of family and stuff, like it's just so it's so beautiful. It's literally genius. Like I think it's like the component of this as like a whole piece that is like is the real genius of it is just that song. It's and the animation too that is in the movie, and I know was also like in the live show originally. Like I don't know, like it's so tacky to like I think describe things like drug trips, but like there's something very kind of drug trippy about it. It's almost like the part of the movie where you're peaking. Whatever like Hedwig slipped you with, you're like, oh God, like reality's like completely falling apart, and there's like double-faced people splitting in two and like oozing back together and stuff. Like it really I don't know, it just has that quality to it. And it's the part, I mean, the last time I watched it, I was crying throughout the whole movie, but that was just full on sobbing because it just wherever I'm at in life, like it's really applicable. And that like on a personal level was another movie that or another point in the movie that like really shaped just like my trajectory of like spirituality. And like I grew up um Catholic, and definitely that was not for me. I think in many ways like culturally I'm still Catholic, like which is like embarrassing to say, but like I need to acknowledge it, otherwise I will never heal from it. But the time in which like I watched this movie, I was definitely kind of starting to exit my annoying atheist phase, and like just getting this like almost like a textbook of like Gnostic poetry just slammed in my lap, just like immediately was like, oh my God, like I need to look up all this stuff, and like I need to understand like what the song's talking about when it's talking about like like Osiris and like yeah, just shaped the next several years of like getting really into like Gnostic Christianity and the Bhagavad Gita and transcendental meditation and all that stuff. And um that informing my queer journey and just my understanding of queerness itself as a deeply spiritual thing. Like I think it's something that this movie kind of goes out of its way to point out is like this just the cultural identity of queerness like kind of immediately puts you in this like spiritual context.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you describe it as a drug trip, but it struck me too as animated with such simplicity. Like it's basically like a child's attempt to understand the universe, which always plays for me because Hedwig is still very much the child that she was. That and somehow, you
Yeah.
know, a sexual being, a person, an adult person with agency and a command over her body, but also still an innocent, which comes out in the music. As angry as she gets, right? Like she still sees things very, very clearly and simply.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean like I think that's like the beautiful thing about this movie too is just like it's talking about like a lot of big ideas and stuff and like but like in a very like simple just kind of like stoned rock star way.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like, yeah, I think like Lou Reed is hot and like I want to like wear glitter and I want to like talk about the nature of existence and reality. Like it's just so yeah, I love it.
Oh, I'm so glad you picked it. I'm glad we got to talk about it. 500 odd episodes and no one's picked it before, so this is a nice touch.
No, I got excited. Yeah, I mean, like I threw out a few options just because I never know like what people have talked about before. But like
Mm-hmm.
after I sent it, because I think the first one that I had thrown out as an option was Back to the Future, but that's just because that's another one of those movies that like I saw as a really young person and like it definitely inspired me to like want to make film. And it's another one that I don't get to talk about that often, but this is one that's like it impacted everything I do. And all the stuff like I'm working on now to like whatever my next movie will be is definitely kind of just like another Hedwig ripoff, I think.
I mean, how confident are you about the musical aspect of it?
Of my own stuff, I mean, I don't know that I'll ever make anything as like next level musical genius as this, but I think that's the other thing like watching this at the point in which like I watched it like when I was pretty irony poisoned, just seeing like what this level of sincerity could be
Yeah.
and like how like oh like that scene where the whole sequence where Tommy and Hedwig are like writing music together is like, and I say this complimentary, it's kind of cringe. Like it's kind of like deeply like, oh, like this is like very vulnerable. But like in this way that I needed to see, because like I don't know. I think another part of the artist's journey is like realizing that the whole like being too cool for sincerity thing is very lame and only holds you back.
Oh, I agree. I mean, there is a resistance to sincerity and earnestness, like to genuinely care about something enough that you made a movie about it or put it in a piece of art is perceived or was anyway. I think we're coming around to a place where it's okay again, but it was perceived as
Yeah.
the greatest falsehood you could tell is like, oh, you don't really care because nobody wants people, like nobody wants to see that level of honesty coming from the screen. I think people are inherently resistant to the idea that someone cares about something. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I think what it is like I think like I don't know. I think to steal a line from The Wrestler or to paraphrase a line from The Wrestler, like I really do think grunge kind of ruined everything. Like I think like the early 90s and like everything just being like chain smoking, like 26-year-olds having all of the pop cultural power, like probably what wasn't ultimately great for society in a lot of different ways. But I don't know, it's like also like I get it. Like I just saw that movie Here, Robert Zemeckis's new movie, and
Mhm.
like I loved it. I get why people don't love it though. It is the most sincere. It is like even more so than like Forrest Gump. It is just like sitting down like, oh, I gotta go get lunch with like my baby boomer dad who's like gonna cry about like the coronavirus. Like it really had that level of like and it is saccharine. Like it's like a little maybe a little too maybe that is a little too sincere, but it still really works for me. Like I think part of it is like when you watch a piece of art that is coming from like especially like with Hedwig when it's like talking about these things in a very like naked and vulnerable way, it's uncomfortable. It's just like uncomfortable to be vulnerable. It's way easier to like watch something that just is kind of has kind of like surface level like simple trashy narrative and no real themes that you need to like relate to or like unpack about your own life.
Yeah.
And it's so funny too. It's such a funny movie too. Like it's so funny and so rude. Like it's like there's that whole like section of the movie where she's just like she's sitting on like a pile of tires and she's got like liquor in a brown paper bag and a huge cold sore on her lips and she's just recounting the like worst parts of her life and it's like equally like devastating and just like so trashy and in this and hilarious in this way that I'm like I I just want to see I just hope like the future of queer art is like more of a reflection of that like more and more like queer artists like just feel the bravery to like kind of be offensive and kind of just be trashy drag queens ultimately because it's I think it's missing. I think it's definitely missing from like mainstream queer representation right now.
Maybe it needs to percolate. Maybe there's a cycle involved. You know, John Waters is the 60s and 70s and then becomes mainstream in the 80s and 90s. And so he inspires a whole new generation. And that's probably partially to do with Hedwig coming out as a cabaret musical first, and then that's like feels like a response to some of the work he was doing in the Waters was doing in the 70s, and then 20 years later, here we are. Maybe there's about to be another big boom. I would like to believe that. I would like to believe that there's some huge generational upheaval coming up in response to everything that's going on, but also in response to the art that already exists, or not in response to it there, but so much as a springboard from it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I definitely I feel like I've seen it start to happen in getting my movie out there and meeting a lot of other filmmakers who are also just starting out or like like the next generation of filmmakers that like I usually get to meet like after People's Joker screenings and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is this sense of like change coming in the future of like cinema does really feel indie to me. It's why like I'm not like as cynical about like I don't know, everybody's just so like morose right now about like the future of film. And I get it because like I do think like the mainstream is actually kind of dying. I think like Hollywood itself is kind of in its death rattle, but like there's just all these like enclaves of and communities like scattered throughout the world right now that are just making art and making film and music and like it's and it's coming from more of this like personal place, and it's not coming from as much of like a commerce place that like it feels like it's already happening. It's really cool because like I don't know. I think I was like up until recently pretty like scared about the future of not just cinema but just art itself.
I think you're right. I think we're going to see, weirdly enough, movie theaters are going to become more diversified and more specialized, other than the megaplexes, because it's the only way to survive, right? I mean, we're seeing it here in Toronto with the review cinema, where they've just got all this genre stuff and queer stuff and camp stuff. There's a program here called Dumpster Raccoon, run by Anthony Oliveira, who is a writer and comic book writer these days too, who's just this amazing wild talent who his whole pitch was, when he launched this, he wanted to show us the shiny garbage that he loves. So he's arranged specialty screenings of Cats and things like that, but also found ways to sort of sneak in genuine cultural milestones under the guise of, well, they're also fun and you can't forget that. And he sells the place out. There's still hope. I'm thinking about like the 60s, where people gathered in basements with 16 millimeter projectors, and that was the theater, that was the cabaret that became the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean I'm not to get a plug in there, but it's just a perfect example. Like I'm hosting a screening in I think February of Louise Ward's new movie, which is called Castration Movie, which like the idea that like you could even screen a movie called Castration Movie is like, wow, what a time to be alive. But we're going to be showing it at a micro cinema in LA called Whammy. That's also like a VHS video store. And like I remember when this video store opened like a few years ago, um, it was so novel to me, just the idea that like that there's just even a video store,
Mhm.
but that it's specifically they don't have DVDs there. They only sell VHSs. And like they're a thriving institution in Los Angeles right now. Like it's absolute. And I've gone to so many like I've I watched Purcell's film Ask Anybody there. Like they'll screen like literal pornography and stuff that is just like absolutely like uh very like niche outsider things, and like it'll just be a packed house, like standing room only, and it's just it's so cool. Like, and I don't know, like I feel like that's something that this movie kind of circles too, is like the 60s and like the counterculture of it all, like kind of that fetishization of counterculture, which I think is like another. I think there are bad aspects of that like have like kind of ruined society in a lot of ways. But like I think we did give like hippies a little too much power. Like not enough change really happened during that time. Everybody was just dropping acid. But there is this like real like beautiful communal thing that like we can pull from, and the sort of like lessons we can learn from like these like generations of like artists that came before us. It's just like it's all right there. Like that roadmap is just all right there. We just gotta be nicer to each other than, you know, a lot of those people were.
My thanks to Vera Drew, whose wild-ass debut, The People's Joker, is now available in a Blu-ray special edition from Altered Innocence, and streaming on Mubi as well as VOD platforms across North America. Thanks also to Maria Silk. She knows what she did. You can find Vera on Instagram at VeraDrew22, VERADREW 22, and you can find Hedwig and the Angry Inch in a special edition Blu-ray and DVD in the Criterion Collection and streaming on Crave in Canada. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 42 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can, and enjoy the holiday. I'll see you next week.